And so, welcome everyone. I hope you can hear me well. If at any point there are any technical difficulties, please message us in the chat. Please message me or my co-host, Venerable Tenzin, who is very kindly seeing us through this process today. We have all met each other on a number of occasions. From a Buddhist point of view, also multiple past lives, for us to be here together practicing the meditation on Vajrasattva and the methods of purification. We, of course, have to have some connection. But it is also true that for some of you, this might be the first event hosted by the CCN that you're joining, or your first time seeing me, perhaps. So, from that point of view, it is always appropriate to speak briefly on one's spiritual background and one's connection to this entire tradition. So first thing they mentioned here in the chat, I'm going to reply to that. I can't start my video because the host stopped it. Yes, well, for the sake of the recording and to make sure nothing is distracting anyone, we thought it would be best to temporarily not turn on our cameras on, except for the facilitator, and also to keep our mics off. For that reason, you cannot unmute yourself, at least not until we get to the question and answer session. But even for that one, it would be preferable to submit questions over email, as was mentioned in the original email. For some events, of course, it is super appropriate to see each other and to look at each other and to be inspired by each other's practice. However, there's always a bit of risk involved there in terms of the technical issues connected to that, and there usually need to be a few moderators and things like that. So for simplicity, because we're really doing it with just the team of two, me and Venerable Tenzin, we thought for now we're just going to keep them off. But we see all of your messages in the chat, and of course we're seeing all the names in the list, and that's quite inspiring. Actually, while I'm sharing these preliminary notes, if you want to mention in the chat where you are connecting to this retreat from, please feel free to do so. I'm sure we are having a very diverse group today. People from many regions I can see by the name list, and I recognize quite a few people. So please feel free to share where you are at right now, where you are finding yourself physically, and also if you want to mention the emotional or spiritual state that you're currently experiencing, that would always, of course, be appropriate as well, because by the end of the retreat we would want to arrive at something imbued with greater clarity, stability, greater sense of joy indeed. So to come back to just the very general introduction, my name is Michael Lobsang Tenpa. I'm a Tibetan Buddhist translator and interpreter, and I have worked in the field of Tibetan studies for a while. I have been working in the field of Dharma education for about 13 years, and I have been teaching for about 13 years, translating for more than that. In particular, I have had the incredible privilege of translating from many, many great masters of the Tibetan tradition, masters of different backgrounds, some of them Himalayan in origin, so Tibetan, Sherpa, and so forth. Some of them coming from other countries, including the United Kingdom, the United States, Australia, and so forth. And over this entire time, have had the great privilege of also, on occasion, being sort of an apprentice teacher, or an apprentice meditation instructor with many of these great masters, and in particular I have the experience of facilitating long-term Vajrasattva retreats, and another specialty of mine, another domain that I'm particularly interested in, is facilitating retreats related to the practices of kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. So, as you might expect, this retreat of ours will be quite richly imbued with the practices of the four immeasurables. There is a direct connection between those and the practice of Vajrasattva. So we'll be doing quite a lot of meditation on loving kindness, compassion, and so forth. There is a good reason to do that, and we will discuss that. So, Also, yes, I'm seeing that someone has mentioned that they are unwell. Well, from my side, please get well soon. Please take this entire retreat in a very lighthearted manner. Of course, no need to force yourself to do anything until you're feeling better. But if it helps to have it in the background, to listen, to maybe do a tiny bit of meditation, of course, that would be lovely. And later in the retreat, we will talk about different ways to adapt the visualizations that we're doing in this practice for healing purposes, or to support our body and mind as they're potentially going through some difficulties. There is a lineage of explanations related to that, and we will explore that later in the course. But we will also be doing a lot of practices related to self-compassion, self-directed loving kindness, empathy towards ourselves, tenderness towards ourselves. So from that point of view, these are always good for when we're feeling unwell. So indeed, please get well soon. And that goes also for everyone who might be finding themselves in a difficult emotional state right now. So I briefly mentioned my own background with Vajrasattva practice. I've had the great privilege of studying it in pretty much all the great lineages of Tibetan Buddhism, and in particular my education has especially been connected to the Nyingma and Gelug traditions, with quite a lot of Drikung Kagyu, Samsakya, and I have also been privileged and incredibly fortunate to receive teachings of the Theravada tradition and teachings of the Chan tradition, and have also had a moderate amount of exposure to other great traditions of spiritual practice in this world. I was born originally in a country that was focusing on the Orthodox Christian practice, so I've had some exposure to that. I have some personal experience with Catholic meditation practices, and then beyond that, I have a certain degree of interest in Sufism, and for that reason have read certain texts and explored certain aspects of that philosophy. But my primary interest lies with the Gelug and Nyingma traditions, especially the Nyingma tradition, and so that is something that will inform our meditation sessions in this retreat. Of course, I know from having looked at the list of registered participants that there are people who associate themselves with different lineages, different traditions, or also people who might be completely new to the Tibetan Buddhist practice in general. So, of course, for that reason, it is always appropriate for all of us, including me and especially me, to adopt the attitude of the so-called beginner's mind. We are invited, therefore, to think that we are looking at all these different practice-related points, all these different systems of mind training, as if we were a complete beginner, and we're looking at all of it with a wish to indeed transform our mind, to strengthen the qualities of wisdom and compassion, along with the associated qualities of mindfulness, generosity, introspection, and so forth. And we also want to potentially transform our behavior, therefore becoming a kinder, wiser person, basically, and sharing more of our goodness with the world, instead of bringing more suffering or pain or greed and so forth into the global interdependence of things. So that's kind of the foundational exploration there. Wanting to purify our mind, to be good, to act in a dignified and wise and compassionate manner, and exploring some of the techniques that might help us with that mental training. So this is the foundational aspiration there. We will work on our motivation more later in this retreat, and we will be actually starting with some practices related to that. But as a foundation, just this attitude of, I'm going to explore the things that are here, the practical methods. I will see if any of them or some of them work for me. And then if something works, if something feels inspiring, if something makes sense, I might continue using that in my life to bring greater degrees of happiness to myself and to others. So that's sort of the foundational attitude of gentle curiosity. Some of my wonderful teachers have always emphasized that it is indeed wonderful to just approach this entire field as a working hypothesis, something that we want to play with, to look at, to see whether it makes any sense, and then to maybe potentially apply things. So another note that I'm seeing here in the chat is, and I would like to honor that definitely, along with everything else. I'm seeing all the notes, of course, but someone is mentioning that their mother has passed away. So once again, the practices that we're going to be doing, of course, we will dedicate them to all sentient beings. But in particular, if there is anyone who's coming to mind who is currently in need of help, or if there's someone that we would like to hold in a field of loving kindness and compassion, if there's someone who has inspired us, benefited us, or just someone we're thinking, hey, they might need help right now, the practices that we're going to be doing will be very, very helpful for strengthening that attitude of ours, but potentially from a Buddhist point of view, certainly for helping other beings as well. And one reason is that these practices actually, from a Buddhist point of view, once again, have incredible power of their own. But another reason is that we're definitely going to work on imbuing everything that we're doing here with a meaningful attitude of compassionate, tender awareness, or awareness that is imbued with loving kindness. So, as it was mentioned in the retreat description and then in the email that you have received, we will have 12 sessions, 4 sessions per day. So 4 sessions today. Today is Friday, December 15. 4 sessions tomorrow and 4 sessions on Sunday. Some people can only join for a few sessions here and there, and hopefully will, if there is interest and inspiration, will watch the entire thing sequentially to simply receive all the explanations and to go through all of the meditation sessions. That, of course, is very rich and powerful then, potentially. Who am I to say? I'm certainly not in any way claiming that anything that I have to share or anything that I can deliver is powerful or transformative, but everything that we're going to be doing comes from a genuine, authentic lineage of transmission, and has been very carefully preserved by multiple generations of incredible yoginis and yogis. So from that point of view, there's definitely authenticity and power there. So we're going to be doing that, and some people, once again, will follow that by means of a recording. Some will be participating in real time. I know that some people have cleared their entire schedule to do that, or have made plans to get up very early in the morning, especially if they are on Californian time, on Pacific time. So absolutely, there are all these options available, and as I've also mentioned in the email, it's definitely possible to just use this as a self-paced course on gradually familiarizing ourselves with the practice of Vajrasattva. And my teachers have always emphasized that if there's something that we feel is deep, profound, if there is, let's say, a course or a video or a book that contains a lot of material, and initially we're only focusing on this point and on that point, and we're grasping this and we're grasping that, later it is always beneficial to revisit something. I myself am notorious for rereading the books that have inspired me, including, of course, the Dharma books, the books related to these practices of mind training. And the most important ones, for me personally, I have read over 100 times. I know that my teachers, including His Holiness the Dalai Lama, follow the same approach. They reread important texts over and over and over and over again, hundreds of times. And I certainly know that quite often some of the teachers for whom I have had the great fortune of interpreting and translating recommended that after the completion of a retreat, please rewatch this retreat. That's something that they would say. So from that point of view, if you ever want to revisit either just the specific guided meditations that we're going to make available as audio files or the whole thing, please feel free to do so. There might be some benefit on that. Not, once again, because of me, but because all of this has been handed down to us by truly incredible practitioners. And we will be looking at some incredible texts together. We will be reading the words of the Buddha. We will be reading some practice manuals written by great practitioners of the past, including some very recent masters. And we will be mentioning some commentarial texts and quoting from them. And I think there's quite a lot of exciting material from that point of view for those of you who are, like me, interested in the scriptural things and the way they describe these practices. But at the same time, we will meditate a lot as well. And that brings us to the very first practice that I would like all of us to do together. And of course, once again, if you just were planning on listening to this entire retreat and not doing any of the meditations, but just listening through and saying, oh, is there anything of potentially of benefit, that's fine. We're all taking things in whatever way is appropriate for us personally, but I'm certainly hoping that there will be quite a few people who do want to do these meditations. So we will be alternating practices in which we simply meditate, meaning we assume a stationary, comfortable position and we go into a relaxed and settled state, and then we do something with our mind while our body and breath are resting in a state of naturalness. So we will be doing those, and we will also, because this is a Vajrasattva retreat, doing sessions of practice in which we recite a text. We recite a text or a liturgy or a practice manual. We recite some mantras and so on. And there is a lot of reasons for doing it in this specific manner. Sometimes just emphasizing meditation, guided meditation kind of thing, in which we will still be working with the Vajrasattva, but without reading out from a text. And sessions in which we are actually reading out a text, reading out a liturgy or practice manual, as they're called, and chanting in a way. Both are very beneficial, and such great yogis of the 20th century as Lama Tupa Nyeshe, for example, emphasized how eventually actually we want to go into the meditation side, but these practice manuals offer us a lot of very helpful guidelines for what to do, so we refer to them as well. And we're kind of finding the balance between this kind of freestyle calligraphy, freestyle mental contemplative calligraphy in which we are drawing and painting with our mind directly, and a more formal training in which we do go through one line at a time, and we focus on the meaning and we explore it all, and therefore we give our mind some discipline. And of course, the Buddhist approach is the approach of the middle way, and in this general sense of the word, what it means is we identify two extremes and we go between them. That is always the recommendation for pretty much everything in life, from a Buddhist point of view, including our practice. So one extreme would be to just meditate and do whatever, randomly, making stuff up. Another extreme would to only focus on these practice manuals and never have any creative freedom whatsoever. So we're going between those two extremes in the way that has been quite beautifully exemplified by some of the masters that we're going to be quoting. But in the commentarial literature on Vajrasattva practice that we're going to be quoting from, it is actually said that it is good to begin by simply allowing our body and mind to rest in a state of naturalness. And for that reason, we will actually begin our practice by doing a meditation that would be very deeply familiar to those of you who have studied with Lama Alan Wallace, and I have been translating for him for interpreting his teachings primarily into Russian, obviously, for about 11 years now. For those of you who have studied with Lama La, you know how much emphasis he gives, how much emphasis he puts on the practice known as the practice of settling body, speech, and mind in their natural states. This is an approach that he most often teaches on the basis of some instructions from Padmasambhava revealed by the great master Karma Lingpa, but this is in no way unique to just that specific scriptural cycle, because there are very similar teachings and very similar practices across the entirety of Tibetan Buddhism and beyond Tibetan Buddhism, also in the Benpa tradition. So many people would also be perhaps familiar with an approach to resting in naturalness that is often taught by the famous Burn master Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche. And this is actually the one that we're going to explore a little bit right now. It also comes from the lineage of Dzogchen teachings, although more strongly affiliated with the lineage of Tenpa Shenram Minpoche. But beyond that, it is a practice that is completely universal in that most Tibetan lineages do one version of it or another. So resting in naturalness, that's where we begin. And for that reason, if you want to join this practice, please find a comfortable stationary position. For many of us, it would probably be an upright position in which we're sitting with our legs crossed, or maybe with our feet flat on the ground if we're sitting on a chair or a sofa or something similar. But I would also like to honor the fact that we are very different people with very different bodies. Some people might need a different position, and that's totally fine. There is, of course, the recommendation to sometimes meditate in the supine position, lying flat on our back in the so-called Shavasana posture. But some masters I know, including, for example, Mingyur Rinpoche, have recently started also emphasizing meditating in the sleeping lion position, in which we're lying on our right side and meditating in the position that the Buddha himself assumed while passing away. So there are different options, so we find whatever stationary position works for our body right now. And then with that, the first invitation is to bring our awareness into the domain of the body. It's as if our awareness was descending along our spine all the way down into the lower half of the body, and in particular, all the way down to the parts of the body that are currently in contact with the ground. Noticing the earth that is holding us. Feeling the tactile sensations associated with the contact between the ground and our body. And in those points of contact, allowing our body to start releasing physical tension. Noticing the sensations in our feet and toes, in our legs in general, and releasing some of the muscle tension there. And then doing the same for our legs in general, all the way up to our hips, then exploring the sensations in our pelvic floor. And once again, releasing some of that tension, noticing the sensations. And observing in the spirit of curiosity and openness. And then the same for our abdomen. For our lower back, and then the entirety of our torso. Noticing the sensations, releasing the muscle tension, and observing. All that while breathing naturally, not trying to force the breath in any way, not trying to control it, really. Not trying to manipulate it in any way or to hold it either. Just noticing. And then the same for our shoulders. Upper arms, elbows, forearms, and then hands and fingers. Then coming back to our shoulders and exploring the sensations in our neck and throat. In the backside of our head, our crown, and finally our facial muscles. Enjoying this very opportunity to connect to the sensations in our face, to observe those, to bring a certain degree of ease and relaxation into that area. And to notice whether there's any leftover tension. And then extending our awareness to the entirety of the body with all of its experiences. Once again, consciously allowing our breath to move naturally without any attempts to force the breath, to hold the breath, to control the breath in any way whatsoever. But using this natural process of breathing to connect to a greater degree of stillness in the body. Noticing the underlying stillness in our body, the stillness of the space itself. And with each out-breath, with each natural exhalation, releasing all the different types of deliberate movement. Movement and tension, both. With each new cycle of breathing, with each new exhalation, we are connecting to that underlying sense of stillness more and more deeply. We are being still, and we are being aware of the stillness. At the same time, while our body is resting, and this dynamic equilibrium, where stillness pervades everything, and yet, of course, there's still the movement of our breath, our heart is still beating, and so on. While all of that is happening with the body, our speech is resting in a state of natural silence. And that's where awareness can, for now, go. Noticing the underlying silence of our speech. The silence that is the background for any acts of speech, any expressions of our speech. And beyond that, as we continue breathing naturally, once again, with each natural exhalation, we can release all acts of speech, even on the level of our mind. Our inner speech related to the so-called inner dialogue or inner monologue, even that gets released with each new out-breath. Very gently, while exhaling, we are connecting this underlying quality of just resting. being silent and being aware of the silence. And then, for our mind, we connect to the quality of spaciousness. This refers to the fact that our mind is not limited to any specific expression, and we don't have to fixate on any specific thought or any specific expression of mental activity. We do not have to lose ourselves in a specific aspect of our mental movements. Because we can, through practicing contemplation, through using these contemplative methods, we can connect to the underlying spaciousness of the mind. Its knowing, open quality. And one analogy that's given to inspire us in this is the analogy with the actual physical room that we're currently finding ourselves in. We could focus on the furniture and all the objects in this physical space, and that's what we typically do with our mind. We'll lose ourselves in our thoughts, images, memories, and so forth. But we could instead focus on the space of the room itself, the space that's holding it all. And similarly with our mind, we can, instead of losing ourselves in the specific thoughts, we can rest in the spaciousness, or we can release everything into that spaciousness. And once again, this is where our natural exhalations can serve as a helpful aid. And so when we notice that we're fixating on something, once again, with a gentle exhalation, everything can be released into spaciousness. And after a while, we can perhaps simply rest in that spaciousness. So we release when we need to release the fixation. But when it's already fairly balanced, we just rest in it. Between the three qualities of stillness, silence, and spaciousness, it's this last one that is the most important in a way. because it has to do with our mind. And the mind is typically described as the most important of the three doors. But if connecting to spaciousness directly feels a bit complex, a bit complicated right now, not particularly easy, we can put greater emphasis temporarily on resting in stillness or resting in silence. All of this will gradually bring us to a state of equilibrium in which our body, speech, and mind are resting in a state of relaxation, stillness, and clarity. Finally, we return to the sensations of our body to ground ourselves there. We very gently introduce some movement to the body by perhaps rocking back and forth, moving our fingers, reactivating our facial muscles. We open our eyes if they were closed, and we very slowly and gently, with a lot of kindness for our body and mind, transition out of this meditation into our shared online space. Thank you. So, obviously, the importance of this practice is not limited to simply doing a little bit of relaxation in the beginning of any meditation practice, but that's of course important as well. And we're also not simply doing it because Lama Alan always emphasizes it, and therefore we must as well. Lama Alan emphasizes it for very good reason, and also on the basis of the instructions from Guru Padmasambhava and other great lineage masters. Why is it emphasized? Because we do need to bring a certain quality of body, speech, and mind to any contemplative training that we're trying to undertake. And ideally, that quality would be the quality of a fusion of relaxation, stability, and relaxation, stillness, and vigilance for our body, relaxation, stability, and clarity for our mind. The same can be accomplished by going through these 3 points described or emphasized by Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche of the Bön tradition: stillness, silence, spaciousness. We eventually have to connect or need to connect with spaciousness, which is, as was described in the meditation itself, bringing us closer and closer and closer to the open, knowing nature of our own mind. For Vajrasattva practice in particular, this will be extremely important, because the ultimate Vajrasattva has to do with the ultimate nature of our mind. Vajrasattva as a symbolic deity, and that's the term I will be using a lot. Vajrasattva as a symbolic deity has a very profound connection to the teachings on the true nature of our mind, and in particular to the Dzogchen tradition of teachings, the teachings on the great perfection, which of course emphasize the necessity to recognize the ultimate nature of our mind. Vajrasattva is actually one of the lineage masters for those teachings, but also a quintessential figure for connecting to those teachings. There's quite a lot of practices in which we meditate on Vajrasattva as a symbolic expression of the ultimate nature of our mind, therefore building a bridge to it. But also within practices of Vajrasattva, including his purification practices, and those are the ones that we're going to be exploring together, there's a strong emphasis on building at least some connection to ultimate Vajrasattva, the Vajrasattva that has to do with the ultimate nature of our mind. So we are initially relying on this conventional Vajrasattva who has the ability to purify us, or who serves as a symbol of purification. We work with that, but at the same time, we're already trying to connect to ultimate Vajrasattva as well. And there are reasons for why we're doing that, but we're going to talk about it. And to connect to that, we need to emphasize this quality of spaciousness, or gradually build our way into it. We need to slowly continue training in these methods for profound release, continue training in the methods in which we release all the deliberate activities of our body, speech, and mind, train in the methods in which we gain the ability to simply rest in naturalness as it's described. And through that, we will be potentially getting glimpses of that deeper nature. So even though initially we're primarily looking at the side of purification, ultimately, once everything that needs to be purified is purified, we connect to that ultimate nature. But at the same time, every single glimpse of that ultimate nature on its own will be serving as an incredibly powerful source of purification. It's sometimes said that eons of negativities are purified if we can simply rest in an approximation of that ultimate nature of our mind for the time period that it would take for an ant to walk down the length of our nose. That's a somewhat strange analogy or description that's given in the teachings, and that is the time frame that was quoted by such great masters of the 20th century, Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche and others. What it means is resting in an approximation of that spaciousness, especially in its deeper levels, for, 5 seconds or so. Even that has an incredible ability to purify our negative propensities, to purify our negative habits, to purify the negative imprints or unwholesome, problematic, destructive imprints in our mind. So that's something that we're already exploring. We were resting in an approximation, not yet of the ultimate nature, but of a profound sense of ease. And that profound sense of ease, once we receive eventually in our life instructions on, for example, a great perfection practice or Mahamudra, essence Mahamudra practice from a qualified master, once we receive those instructions, that will be taking us straight to what is mentioned here, to that ultimate Vajrasattva. And we're just building the foundation for that here together. But at the same time, there is another kind of settling that we are also invited to do before starting to do any type of meaningful mental training. This second type of settling is described in the teachings of Lerab Lingpa, for example, once again, a great master whose teachings would be familiar to many of those present because Lama Alan has translated and transmitted a lot of those teachings. So in some of Lerab Lingpa's writings, he emphasizes this practice of settling down in a truly constructive motivation for our contemplative training. So there obviously is a reason for even using that wording. Why do we settle down in it? Well, actually, because profoundly virtuous motivation is in itself an incredible source of safety, security, is an incredible protection. I actually know of this from personal experience, but I am sure that that is also true for many of those present. And I know in particular that, well, with 32 wars currently going on this planet, including those wars that we are directly witnessing perhaps in our own region, in our own country, in our neighborhood, many people who are suffering from the incredible atrocities related to that. But also beyond that, of course, we have the suffering of, the pandemic, the suffering of ecological catastrophes that we're witnessing, and everything else that's happening in the political domain. But beyond that, we also have the suffering of sickness, old age, dying, and so forth. So basically all the human problems that we're going through together. Many people have witnessed, and that's certainly my experience as well, that while we're going through all of that, one of the major sources of protection for our mind, one of the major sources of sanity, is a truly vast and positive motivation, such as the motivation of bodhicitta that's emphasized in Buddhism. But beyond that, simply the motivation of kindness and compassion. And many people might be familiar with that because they've read Viktor Frankl and his reflections on his time in a concentration camp. Some would be familiar with that through the stories of incredible Tibetan practitioners, great yogis and yoginis who were, once again, in concentration camps, tortured in concentration camps, suffering in concentration camps. In particular, some of us might have a connection to two incredible lamas who had very similar experiences in concentration camps. One of them, of course, is the great Garchen Rinpoche, who's still alive and teaching primarily in Arizona, but his teachings are available to everyone online, and such an incredible source of wisdom and compassion in this world. And the other Lama would be Yangtang Rinpoche, who passed away a few years ago, and who also spent many, many years in a concentration camp practicing there. Both of them emerged out of that horrifying, terrible, unthinkable experience with actually a greater degree of sanity, wisdom, compassion, and love than most of us would imagine as possible. And both of them were not in any way ruined by that experience. Their sanity was not destroyed. So what was their protection while they were going through those horrible appearances? While they were experiencing those horrible situations that, of course, are a part and parcel of being in a concentration camp. Well, of course, it's the totality of their mental training and everything that they were practicing in their life in general, all the teachings of the Dharma that they were taught to apply for transforming the mind. But in particular, both of them, it seems, emphasized the importance of bodhicitta, the importance of a truly altruistic and wise, at the same time, motivation that aspires for something incredibly meaningful, full awakening for the sake of all sentient beings. And in general, from my observations as a meditation facilitator and someone who regularly talks to people who find themselves in war zones, and also to people who are suffering from other types of physical and mental pain, it seems that so-called cognitive practices in which we transform our motivation, and we transform it into something deeply meaningful and altruistic and something that is connected to the overall interdependence of things. These cognitive practices serve as an incredible source of protection, and they imbue everything else that we're doing with a powerful sense of meaning and with a lot of depth. So for that reason, before we undertake Vajrasattva practice, or any purification practice, or really any Dharma practice whatsoever, we're always invited to put a lot of emphasis on methods related to adjusting our motivation. In the Buddhist tradition, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we are very simply always invited to cultivate and strengthen our bodhicitta. And one of Lama Alan's gurus, I believe it was Geshe Rabten, not Geshe Navan Dargye, I think it was Geshe Rabten, once actually said that everything in the Dharma can be seen as preparation for bodhicitta, as bodhicitta itself, and as something that flows out of bodhicitta. And here, what it refers to is conventional bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is the wish to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. For Vajrasattva practice, bodhicitta at least, contrived bodhicitta at least, bodhicitta that is merely a thought, oh, I will become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, is indispensable. It's included in the practice itself, as we will see when we start talking about the 4 factors of purification. We need that so that our practice actually becomes powerful. So with that, it would always be good to work on that. But before we work on bodhicitta proper, it's always good to start with a certain degree of loving kindness and compassion. Lama Alan often quotes from Atisha, who famously and facetiously said that it's only Tibetans, and he meant the Tibetans of his own historical age, only Tibetans believe that they can cultivate bodhicitta without the four immeasurables. Of course, his great contribution was counteracting that misconception and actually teaching very powerful practices for cultivating bodhicitta that he received from many of his gurus, but in particular from the great master of Suvarnadvipa, master known as, colloquially known as Sir Lingpa, or master from the Golden Isle. So Atisha obviously counteracted that misconception and reintroduced the importance of loving kindness, compassion, and so forth as the precursors to bodhicitta. But before we cultivate universal loving kindness and universal compassion, we actually are invited, and that's the way it's been taught in the Pali tradition and in the Sanskrit tradition as well, we are invited to first cultivate a profound sense of loving kindness directed towards ourselves. This person sitting here, or maybe in your case, lying down, or, I don't know, you might be standing or walking or, I don't know, doing, using any other position. But this very person present here and trying to practice here is important, because this is the person that we're trying to purify in a way. There are certain aspects to this person that are to be purified, because we think, well, these aspects are problematic in that they can bring about suffering. I want to suffer, I want to remove the causes of suffering, that's why I am working with these practices of purification. So, what this already implies, what our very presence here implies, is that we do have a certain degree of self-directed loving kindness and self-compassion. We do want to have happiness. We do want to be free from suffering. That's already there to a certain degree. But, as we also know, because of cultural conditioning and because of our individual propensities and so forth, there are always issues related to that. There are always obstacles to truly living this sense of self-directed loving kindness, which has nothing to do with self-obsession or narcissism or anything of that nature. We're just simply talking about this underlying fundamental wish to be happy and to be free from suffering, which is completely wholesome in itself. The problem is that we sometimes get misguided in our attempts to gain that happiness, and we get confused about what are the causes of that happiness. So that's why we need practices like Vajrasattva and all the methods related to wisdom and so forth. But to counteract some of those issues related to perhaps self-hatred, toxic shame, a profound dislike for ourselves that some people experience. And I hear about issues like that almost every day when people talk about their practice and their difficulties with their practice. To counteract all of that, it's good to train in methods related to loving kindness and self-compassion. So for that reason, we will revisit a practice that will be very deeply familiar to many of you, and that's the practice of the so-called fourfold vision quest. It's a practice of self-directed loving kindness that is combined with a cognitive exploration, an exploration related to our wishes, desires, aspirations, goals, and intentions. Why we do the exploration? To establish greater clarity there, and also to a certain degree to connect to the deeper, more intuitive levels of our awareness. Why do we use the self-kindness element, self-directed loving kindness element? Well, to strengthen our loving kindness for ourselves and by extension also our loving kindness for others. So at the same time we're training in loving kindness itself, which is a necessary precondition for having bodhicitta and therefore for practicing Vajrasattva successfully, but we're also using that to establish greater clarity with regards to our goals, aspirations, wishes. And we need that clarity so that this retreat is meaningful and so that all of our practices are meaningful. So for that reason, let's stretch if we need to, honestly. That's always good. That's an act of self-directed loving kindness already. And then once we have done that, let's find a comfortable stationary position and return to the qualities of stillness, silence, and spaciousness. before exploring the Fourfold Vision quest itself. And so once again, we assume a comfortable stationary position with kindness and compassion for our own body. And then we allow our awareness to descend into the depths of the body, into the depths of our tactile field, where we start observing the tactile sensations. Noticing the sensations in our feet and toes and releasing some of the tension from that area. And then doing the same for our legs in general. And then, similarly, exploring the sensations in our pelvic floor. In our hands and fingers. In our shoulders. And in our facial muscles. Then bringing our awareness to the entirety of the body and releasing all the types of tension and deliberate movement to experience a deeper degree of stillness. Our speech is already resting in a state of silence, so we can simply notice that. And our mind, supported by our body, by our speech, which includes our breathing, our mind can similarly connect to the quality of spaciousness as we continue releasing all the different types of fixation with each new exhalation. through releasing our fixation, through releasing that tendency to fully identify ourselves with the different movements of the mind, we are connecting more and more deeply to a state beyond any reference points, to a state of open knowingness. And in the state of open knowingness, we then initiate the process of exploring for questions and generating self-directed loving kindness. So we bring a question to our mind, we allow our mind to manifest a certain general answer, a general vision, a general understanding, and then to that answer we respond with a wish of loving kindness, with a wish of may it be so. And the first question is, how do I personally envision my own genuine flourishing? How do I personally envision the genuine type of happiness that I would like to eventually experience, eventually realize? Once our mind comes up with some general vision, some general idea, some general understanding, even if this understanding is not yet detailed, even if this understanding is merely a vague feeling of the type of flourishing that we would like to experience, still responding to it with loving kindness would be appropriate. And we do that by wishing, may it be so. May I experience this genuine well-being. May I realize my heart's desire. If we wish, with each new out-breath, with each new natural exhalation, we can breathe life into this vision, therefore also strengthening our aspiration of loving kindness. May it be so. Adding more and more energy, cognitive energy, the energy of our desires and wishes, to this powerful aspiration for genuine well-being, to this wish of may it be so. And then for a little while, even imagining that we have attained this genuine well-being, that we have realized it indeed. And with that, we move on to the second question, therefore. The second question is, in order to experience this genuine well-being, this genuine flourishing, what types of support, what resources, what types of help do I need to receive from the world around me? Once a certain vision has emerged, certain general understanding, our response is once again, may it be so. May I receive these types of support. And be able to accept them. And then as we continue breathing naturally, if we wish, we can use our in-breath, our inhalation, as an aid, imagining that with each inhalation we're drawing these types of support closer to ourselves. We're bringing them into the field of our awareness. And accepting them. And for a little while we can even imagine actually possessing these types of help, these types of support. The third question is, how do I need to change in order to arrive at this genuine flourishing, to experience this genuine well-being? What habits of mine do I need to change? What qualities do I need to strengthen or uncover to a greater degree? And what do I need to let go, to release, to abandon? Once a certain general idea has emerged, responding to that with a wish of may it be so. May I indeed transform in all these beautiful ways. And then using our breath, if we wish, as an aid by imagining that with each cycle of breathing we are indeed slowly transforming. And then, for a little while, even imagining that we have transformed. Just to imagine how that would feel. And then for the fourth question, asking ourselves, what do I want to bring to the world around me? What could my meaningful contribution be to the lives of others, to the overall interdependence of things? What could be my most meaningful offering? And then responding to that with, may it be so. May I indeed share this gift with the world. Breathing life into this wish, and with each exhalation even imagining that we are extending this gift to all who live. Transforming therefore their lived reality, but beyond that, the overall interdependence of things. The whole web of life. All with this powerful wish of, may it be so. And then for the final moments of this practice, adding a special aspiration related to this very retreat. Adding the wish of, may my practice throughout this retreat, may my practice of these methods, may my exploration of these methods indeed contribute to the fulfillment of all these beautiful aspirations. May my practice of Vajrasattva and other methods that we're going to be exploring contribute to the greatest possible happiness and well-being for all who live. With that, we come back to our body, releasing all the aspirations, images, and so forth, anchoring ourselves in the physical sensations. Noticing the process of breathing and enjoying that. And then, slowly introducing some movement to our body. Walking back and forth, moving our fingers, reactivating the facial muscles, opening our eyes if they were closed. And then slowly transitioning out of our meditation into our physical space and into the shared online space of our community practice. Thank you. We are slowly approaching our break, but before that, to recap this session, in addition to just offering some introductory notes related to sessions and so forth, we explored actually a very important foundation for not simply the practice of Vajrasattva, but for any deity-related practice. In the tradition in which I've been trained, it is sometimes said that when we start practicing such methods as the meditation of Vajrasattva, or meditation on Tara, or really any other practice, including simply meditating on the breath, we are initially invited to apply the so-called key points of the body, speech, and mind. The key point of the body that we're supposed to apply before undertaking any of these profound types of training is to find a comfortable stationary position and then to allow our body to relax in profound and meaningful ways. And that's exactly what we accomplished by using the practice of settling our body, speech, and mind in their natural states, or the practice of stillness, silence, and spaciousness. So the key point of the body is to adopt a comfortable stationary position and to relax deeply so that all the inner energies of our subtle nervous system can flow in a harmonious way. That will be a powerful support for our practice. And of course, we also don't want to distract ourselves from practice by strange, unnecessary, neurotic, essentially, movements. And for that reason also, we're seeking this deeper connection to stillness. So that's the key point of the body. For our speech, we are invited to abide in silence until the time comes for us to chant or recite something. And that time will definitely come with regards to this specific practice, because Vajrasattva practice includes such things as chanting, first the practice manual and then mantras and so forth. So we'll explore that as well. But initially just finding that sense of silence. And beyond that also connecting to the process of natural breathing. So sometimes in this oral tradition of instructions, it's said that we can do some breathing exercises. There are many of those actually. One is to simply take 3 deep breaths and then to go back to natural breathing. Another is to do the so-called threefold breathing purification practice, or the 9-round purification breathing exercise. Beyond that, there's also a practice of counting 21 breaths, just to allow our mind to become a bit more focused and clear. And then after that, once again, just allowing the breath to move naturally. But the essence of all of those techniques is to allow the breath to flow naturally. That's the quintessential point. So being silent and allowing the breath to flow naturally is the key point of our speech. We have accomplished that as well. We have trained in it. And then for the key point of the mind, first we need to bring it to a relatively neutral state. That's what we accomplish through observing our breath, but also through connecting to spaciousness. That's another way to do it. We did that. And then, very importantly, for the key point of our mind, we also need to generate a profound and meaningful motivation. Eventually, it has to be the motivation of bodhicitta, the wish to become fully awakened for the benefit of all beings. So we're moving in that direction, even to simply generate that thought right now, I am doing this to fully wake up for the benefit of all beings. That's already kind of ticking that box. It's already enough in a way. Yes, we need to go through about 50 billion stages of bodhicitta training beyond that to make it truly uncontrived eventually. But just having that thought, but having it in a genuine way, is already important, meaningful, necessary, and in a way enough in that without it, not correct. But if it's there, if it's present, okay, that condition has been fulfilled. But as a precursor to bodhicitta, we need loving kindness, we need compassion, and so forth. And therefore, we need to undertake all these types of cognitive training in different types of aspirations, different types of intentions, different types of motivation. And that's exactly what we accomplished through revisiting this practice of the Fourfold Vision Quest, which for many people has probably become deeply familiar, part of their daily practice, maybe for some, a part of just cognitive training in general. Some people revisit this practice every month, every couple of months, every week. There's all sorts of ways of doing it. But for us right now, we will be starting each day with this practice. So we will do it again tomorrow morning, and then we'll do it again on the morning of our third day together, just to continue exploring this powerful wish for happiness that we have. And in our subsequent sessions, we will continue playing with a bit of loving kindness and compassion each time, and also with some giving and taking practice, to make sure that our Vajrasattva practice is truly deeply imbued with loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta. That's a necessary condition, and there's also lots of precedents for that, so I'll refer to them a bit later. For now, however, it is time to practice self-directed loving kindness and self-directed compassion by taking a meaningful and enjoyable break. So I believe our next session is in an hour and a half. So for those who are on the UK time, that would be 2 p.m. If you're in another time zone, that's just in an hour and a half. And that's when we'll see each other. The Zoom link will remain the same for all the sessions of this retreat. So see you soon, and thank you so much. Please enjoy the break.